Okay, so let's talk about how to calculate a payoff from selling interest rate futures for the purpose of hedging a floating rate loan. So here's our scenario. We've got Chrysler LLC, privately held company, and they have a floating interest rate payment that is due 3 months from now. So they've got a bond, and whatever they pay is probably linked to LIBOR or something like that. And so the problem for Chrysler is just the uncertainty involved in that. They don't know what it is. They know they have to pay in 3 months, but they don't know what it's going to be. And so in order to effectively lock in the rate of interest that they are going to pay, they can sell an interest rate futures rate contract. And for an interest rate futures contract, if you sell it, what that means is that you're short. And what that means is that you generate money on that futures contract when the futures price falls in value. So if you short an interest rate futures contract and interest rates go up, then it's like a bond price. Just like a bond price, when interest rates go up, price of this futures contract falls. And so the idea here is that if interest rates go up, which is bad for this company, Chrysler, since, they've got an interest rate payment coming up. If interest rates go up, then this short futures position that they sold is going to profit. And they're going to take that profit from selling or shorting. We're using these two words interchangeably when it comes to trading futures contracts. You'll find that I'm selling the yen or I'm shorting the yen. They're meaning the same thing in industry. But the profit from shorting this interest rate futures contract is going to go and offset the additional payments that they have to make because of the higher interest rate on their 3-month floating interest rate. So that's conceptually what's going to go on. But calculating whether this short interest rate futures contract is profitable or not is fairly straightforward and quick. And so let's take a look at how that would be under these two scenarios, scenario A and scenario B here. So first, scenario A, if the floating interest rate 3 months from now is 6.10%, what did Chrysler gain or lose on this position? So in order to kind of calculate or really solve this problem, we first need to look at what our assumptions are. And the two assumptions that I see here in this problem setup are the initial interest rate futures contract price is set 93.15. So the interest rate futures, the closing price at the time that this futures rate contract was sold was 93.15. And that translated to a yield of 6.85% per year. So the effective yield on this interest rate futures contract is 6.85%. And just as a side note here, the pricing of interest rate futures contracts is that if you take 100 minus the yield, you get the price. And so that's just kind of how interest rate futures are priced. If the interest rate in the market goes up, so if yields go up, then you can see the price of the interest rate futures contract falls. It's just that inverse relationship between bonds, which are interest rate securities, and prices exists here for interest rate futures contracts prices as well. But at any rate, the question is, if the floating interest rate 3 months from now is 6.10%, what did Chrysler gain or lose on this interest rate futures position? And to answer that, we really just compare the interest rate, the price of the interest rate futures at the time that we sold it, at the time that we entered into this position and shorted it, versus the interest rate that ends up in 3 months. And so because this is the interest rate that they're going to pay, they're linked to whatever interest rates are in the market, say LIBOR. Well, that's fine, because the interest rate in 3 months, this is what's going to be the yield on the interest rate contract itself at that time. And so by comparing the two, we can get a gain or loss calculation on this interest rate futures position that we took on. And that will tell us something about how effective it is as a hedge. So when we started this position, it was 6.85%. That was what the interest rate futures were pricing at, that 93.15. And by the end, in part A, interest rates had fallen to 6.10%. Interest rates had fallen. And so that means the futures prices have risen. And for us, that's not good, because we had bet on a falling price for this futures contract, and our futures position ended up with a loss, therefore, of minus 0.75%. So we lost because we were short this interest rate futures contract 0.75 of a percentage point. And while that sounds bad, that's not really bad, because the whole point of entering into this futures contract was to hedge a floating interest rate payment 3 months from now. And because interest rates fell from 6.85% to 6.10%, the cost of our loan, which was linked to a floating rate, fell as well. So the losses on our futures position here were offset by gains as a result of the reduced cost of borrowing. And if we size this relationship right, if we short enough futures contracts, which is kind of beyond the scope of this problem, such that the dollar amount of losses offset the dollar amount of gains from our reduced interest payment on our loan, then we have effectively locked in an interest rate payment. We've sort of created a fixed rate. No matter what happens with the futures position, it's going to be offset by the amount of gains on our reduced cost of loan, and vice versa. All right, let's take a look at the last part B, where it's slightly different. Instead of interest rates falling, interest rates rose. So they've gone from 6.85% now up to 8.12%. And what did Chrysler gain or lose on this futures position? The setup is still the same. So we just plug 6.10% is the interest rate that was on offer for this futures contract at the time that we entered into this position. So we sort of put our short on at that price, and eventually rates went up to 8.12%. And so for us, because we are short interest rate futures, that's a gain of 1.270%. And that means we gained this much on our futures position. And because this is a hedge, we take this gain and use it to offset our higher cost of borrowing in this scenario, where LIBOR has, or whatever benchmark has crept up from 6.1% now to 8.12. So the whole point is to take your gains, or to make sure that your gains or losses on the futures contract offset the gains or losses on your underlying floating rate loan.